This podcast discusses sexual violence and other material listeners may find distressing. Please look after yourself as you listen and feel free to switch off at any point. You can visit withyouwecan.org to find help, but remember to call 000 in emergencies. We're recording on the lands of the Gadigal, where sovereignty was never ceded. We recognise that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples continue to experience the ongoing impacts of colonisation, including disproportionate rates of sexual violence and institutional harm. We pay our respects to elders past and present and commit to advocacy that does not replicate the harms it seeks to address. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. Victim survivors live in a constant state of the unknown. I know that because I've lived it. Shrouded in secrecy, silenced by process, we're asked to place our faith in a justice system that was never designed for us, at the most vulnerable moment of our lives. But I won't stand for it. We're cracking this system wide open so you and everyone around you understands what it actually means to navigate the legal system after sexual violence. I'm Sarah Rosenberg, Executive Director of With You We Can, and this is what no one told us. Laura Rowe is an admitted lawyer who, after finishing her law degree, found herself navigating the criminal justice system as the complainant or a survivor, and the media laws surrounding her matter, including the gag laws she was bound by in the Northern Territory. Through independent legal representation provided by Mark Lawyers and the Let Her Speak campaign, the court granted her the right to share her story, and in the process she found their support throughout the criminal trial critical to achieving a sense of justice. She feels their support allowed her to take up a seat at the table she created, and she's become a passionate advocate for independent legal representation ever since. She's used her right to share her story to advocate for independent legal representation and tailored consent laws in media reporting. Laura, I'm so happy you've made the trip from Canberra for me. I will never forget the first time I heard you speak. I felt like you were taking the words out of my mouth. We're so aligned on so many levels. I'm really happy to have you sitting here with me. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Absolute pleasure to be here.
You had an experience of childhood sexual abuse that led you to report to police and engage with the justice system decades later, just after you'd finished a law degree. Tell me how that came to be.
Yeah, so obviously I'm sitting here with you today talking about independent legal representation and obviously the entire legal process that ended up coming out of that report. But realistically for me at that point in time, I did not know what I was getting myself into, and it's difficult almost to paint a picture. I want to say of the naivety that I had, but it also wasn't naivety. It was just based in what, the expectations that we all have about how our community functions, basically.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Like we just don't learn about, you don't learn about it at school,
Yeah.
right? So
yeah. So, and I think and that's it. So for me, yes, coincidentally, I had just finished my law degree and I was in fact doing my College of Law's stuff to gain admittance at the time. But really for me, what was going on in my life is I had just become a mother. And there was a lot of stuff going on contextually, both in my personal life, but also in broader discussions as well. I think the other thing that was hard for me, I experienced intrafamilial abuse, and specifically sibling sexual abuse. I didn't actually understand that I had been sexually assaulted at the time, just because of how we speak about it. We talk about stranger danger and all of that stuff.
Of course.
It took such a long time for me to actually realise that I had been the victim of a crime. And I think that, that experience of just becoming a mother, seeing a lot of those discussions, just a lot of things that were happening around, I just started to become very overwhelmed, I guess, is the way to explain it, where I'd actually no, I won't go into that. But I
flagging Laura and I, because both of us can talk forever, we've come up with a little way to make sure that we keep each other on track. So that's what that is. No one's
cutting off.
Yeah.
This is self-imposed. I just want to flag because, God, you could talk about so many things, your expertise, your experience itself even.
But so I think ultimately what it came down to was just that I had gotten to a point in life where I essentially felt like, I had a piece of information about an individual that potentially may or may not have posed a future risk to the community.
Mm-hmm.
And I always feel like it's really important for me to say in that, like I make zero assessments about that because I just don't have the expertise. And that was the entire point of me essentially going to the police.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like at the time, I was letting them know about a bad guy. Hey, you might want to look into this. I guess I didn't actually understand. And I think a lot of people don't understand that actually when you go and report something like a sexual assault to police, you are launching a criminal investigation, a whole criminal process, where they've got rights, you've got rights, not as many.
You've got
rights. But it like you are actually launching a whole investigative process and one in which you are not the center of.
Absolutely.
And I think that's it. Like, because I think, most people's experiences of the police might be that they're, on a night out and they're, there to, make sure everyone's safe and all of those sorts of things. Obviously, other people have other experiences of police, but for the most part, we're like, they're the guys that we call to just make sure we're all safe and the bad guys taken care of. That's kind of not how it works with sexual assaults. It's just, I think it was a great naivety for me in that I also just didn't understand, and I still didn't understand at that time, that actually what had happened to me was a crime.
Yep.
I just thought it was like information that was maybe useful for them to know. And I've thought of this analogy and I feel like there's a more eloquent way to put it, but I've never been able to find one. But
give it a go.
I always felt like, having been the victim of sibling sexual abuse, I always felt like I was the cat that got strangled by the serial killer in their youth, right? Like I didn't ever think that like what happened to me was a bad thing, but I thought, maybe it's indicative of concerning things that people should be worried about later on.
Yeah.
It took me a really long time, and it wasn't even until I was like in the process that I was like, actually, I did experience quite a serious crime. It shouldn't have happened.
So much of it as well is designed to make you doubt yourself, and it not even as you're just navigating the process, but we're constantly doubting our own experiences of harm. We want it to be okay, I think, and also we expect stranger danger, men jumping out from bushes.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, and quite, I don't know, bluntly, is that this happened when I was a child. It was my early experiences of life. I don't actually have a before point of reference. I don't have, like, that's just something that I had experienced from a really young age and struggled with.
You didn't know any different.
I had no idea. Yeah, I knew nothing different than that experience. So it does take a really long time. And obviously as well, when they're a family member, you have a relationship with them outside of that abuse that has occurred. And that,
it's confusing.
It is really, yeah, absolutely. So, so I think, and I think that's the thing. I think I never took it lightly, what I was doing in reporting that, because,
you're from a small community as well, which I think is a really important factor here. You'd grown up in the NT.
Yeah.
How did that influence your decision making?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think I am incredibly community minded, and I think that that's something, you know, as much as I had, you know, not a great childhood in a few measures, I also grew up in the most beautiful community you could ever imagine. And I feel so fortunate. And I think anyone that's met anyone from the Northern Territory knows that that's, you know, our whole identity and everything. It is just, there is no greater sense of community I could have ever have imagined. And I've always, you know, I've had people remark to me over the last few years when they've realised what I've experienced, and they go, wow, you're quite, you know, I know there's a lot of problems with this, but they like quite balanced in all of this. Like I actually had a beautiful, beautiful childhood outside, you know, outside of what happened to me.
It never ceases to amaze me how you separate and how you still find gratitude and joy in, and you were experiencing this horrible thing. And I just think it's remarkable. I think you're remarkable. I mean,
yeah. Well, I appreciate that. But I also will just say, like, actually what I experienced is, statistically speaking, unremarkable.
Very good point.
Yeah, it is completely unremarkable. And I think it's interesting, and we'll probably like talk about this a little bit later on. I never made the decision to like, you know, I guess I don't want to say I never made the decision to share my story, but I never made the decision for everybody in this small community or, you know, the whole world to realise that it was me and all of this stuff. Yeah. You know, if I had had my choice, I wouldn't. I mean, I don't want to say if I had my choice, I wouldn't be sitting here with you today, but like, like
thanks. Yeah.
No, but you know, and I think it's you know, I think it's just, I guess, the hand of cards that you get dealt with in life, right? Like I got dealt this hand of cards. I couldn't do anything about that. But along with that, coming from a smaller community, I've always felt a really great sense of commitment to those people that have like helped shaped me and who I am. And I think, you know, especially when it comes to, you know, the fact that I did do my law degree up there, it's really instilled in me that balance of like really creating a criminal justice system that is community focused. And I think that we, I think that's kind of what it is, just about centering it all back onto community and like what we actually expect these systems to do to protect us, to look out for truth and justice, and all of those sorts of things, and then make assessments on, you know, the potential incarceration of an individual, which is the most...
It's a huge thing.
It's a huge thing for a state. It's the most serious offence that a state has available to an individual. And I fundamentally agree with the protections in place for that person. We all benefit from it. And I think as well, it's always important to just remember that like sexual assaults do sit within the broader context of criminal proceedings. And there's lots of discussions about whether that should be the case or not, but it is at the moment. And I think that it's always kind of important to make sure that we are creating a system where victims are able to put forward their experiences, you know, in terms of those assessments, and then, be able to centre them back in. Sorry, I went on a rant.
There's so much we could talk about. Yeah, my God,
we'll go back and unpack that. I think, but yes,
you're just such a wealth of knowledge with this, you know, this multifaceted perspective you had. You've spoken, you know, from the start, it's almost difficult to talk about just how different a process like reporting to police is from what you might expect.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that. What are the key moments that you felt unsupported or isolated or confused? Because you ended up seeking your own independent legal representation, which is, you know, largely what we're talking about today. Yeah. But that came from somewhere. So tell me about it. How did that come to be?
Yeah. So I think so after I provided my statement to police, the investigation started. People were getting calls and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, and I think that is one aspect that was really surprising for me. I think another reason why I didn't report is, lots of reasons, but one of them is I was like, well, like, how would you even prove they can't do anything about something like that. I didn't quite realise, and I didn't quite realise that like my life was evidence. All the people over the years that I'd spoken to, confided in, or have been with me through some really difficult moments in my life, getting phone calls, to talk about that. And it's
you couldn't give them a heads up. You weren't the one.
No, and
calling.
It's funny again because I actually was doing my law degree, right?
Yeah.
I was so paranoid about doing something and then it impacting being declared a fit and proper person, which is like not really something, I don't know if I should have been worried about it or not, but I was.
I think it's totally reasonable. I mean, you and I talk all the time about paranoia is a rough word. It's just general anxiety that is totally fair about how we look, what we're doing. We were saying what shade of lipstick says believe me. I love that quote from Bree Lee's book. But for you, a law degree, you know how that's going to look down the track. Like she's using what she knows to manipulate the situation. It's all just, it happens all the time.
Yeah, and it's funny though as well because I talk about it's really important that, people accused of this stuff have a fair trial and all of that stuff. I genuinely, fundamentally believe that, but also realistically, I always feel like the counter of that is like, when you're saying, oh, I'm falsely accused, when people talk about false accusations or whatever and all of that, the counter point of view to that is that I one day just unhinged, just went and gave really graphic awful false accusations about something. That's a really serious thing.
And that's a really serious thing to accused of.
And it's really funny because I think that we kind of just need to when
think about it for a minute.
Yeah, we're actually there are serious accusations and questions about individual characters that are thrown both ways in these trials.
The right to a fair trial. What about the community's right to a fair trial?
And 100%. And I think that's what I was saying before. I think, when we are talking about these criminal proceedings, and I guess the whole basis for the point of independent legal representation, right, is that the courts exist for the community to assert its rights, establish measures for their safety. Not assert its rights, but assert its values, make assessments for their safety. It is about the community. It's not, it is actually community-centred and it needs to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important.
Because it's not he said, she said, which is the number one myth that people say. They're it's the victim versus the accused. It's not. You're cooperating with the state.
And I think, and it's interesting because also, and I think, there's a lot to be said about, I think it's right that it's like that. And actually as well, for me as a victim, I actually felt like I wanted that. I didn't want to be I didn't want it to be a situation where I was seeking.
It's not like you had some
vengeance.
It's not.
And I just want to say, I acknowledge that I have some really unhelpful thinking. So I feel like if there's anybody sitting there, you shouldn't be worried about, are there a future risk? Am I being you shouldn't it's the blame sits with them and the risk and all of that. But it's important to me to sort of walk you through my thinking at those points in time. So I just want to acknowledge that. So when I talk about this, it's just I know that I have had unhelpful thoughts at times.
We're putting you back in a place where you're talking about this as it was unfolding.
Oh, completely.
So
yeah.
Totally fair. Love that you're acknowledging.
Yeah. And I think that's just like one thing I just want to say. Yeah. And I think that was it. Like I had, right in the lead up to reporting, I'd had like nights where I was like scouring through research on the, like on recidivism, on all of this kind of stuff. And I was like, I can't make this decision. Like I was like, yeah, is this like a serious thing that they should know about, or like, you know, like I actually just didn't know, and I needed the community to like make that assessment, right? Yeah. And I think that was the thing that was quite perplexing to me in a way, was that it is immediately an adversarial process, right? And this person's innocence, especially when it comes to sexual assault trials, like this person's ability to fight these charges most often is just, she's crazy, or like to call into question
it's the best we have after all these years. She's crazy.
It is. And it's just, you know, and it's always a mix of like she's crazy or like
she's jealous. Yeah.
It's like it's always some variation of something that's quite a serious accusation to be making about another individual. So I found it really difficult to be like, hang on a second, I'm going to be like, I'm being really called into question here, and I don't want to be over asserting myself, but I want to protect myself.
Yeah.
So when it was first reported in the local media, it was done in a way that it was like very obvious who the perpetrator was. Yeah. And I mean, it's also a small town. But they'd also reported that they had been arrested for abuse against a family member. And I was like, I just remember being really panicked and being like, I need to get that taken down. Like people know, like my phone started going off and people were putting it together. And I just like, it was a really weird day because it was the worst thing I'd ever imagined in all of my days of my existence. It was like everybody finding out this awful thing that had happened to me and thinking of me differently. But at the same time as well, like nobody thought poorly of me.
Yeah.
And I was really quite surprised by that.
Yeah. I remember being surprised. I mean, even just last night we were talking all about disbelief, and that really wasn't your experience when it came to community so much.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, like, I think it's maybe not as clear cut as that. There were some people that was still, like everybody felt sad for me. I mean, I don't want to say everybody. There were some people that weren't. But for the most part, people were. They didn't think I was gross and disgusting and all of this sort of stuff, or all those things that I had sort of been worried about all these years. But, you know, but because it was sibling sexual abuse, some people were like, oh, you know, and I should say as well, there is quite a significant age difference between myself and my eldest brother. Like it was maybe not, and it's hard because obviously as well, our significant age difference was not so significant at that time, and you know, not only had we grown up in the same like small community, also members of the same family, obviously.
So happened to be related.
But like also shared professional networks that kind of span the country, and like people had known us. So I think it was like, I think I have a lot of sympathy for people kind of around us in a lot of ways, because it's a really hard thing to wrap your head around, to be like, oh, like, so I think that, you know, as people do, they still held sympathy for you, but they're like, oh, but, you know, there must have been, you're like, they also still hold a little bit of sympathy for them as well, because it's really hard to kind of come to terms with that. And I think it really, it impacted a lot of people. Yeah, so I remember being really panicked, and I wanted to see if I could, like, I wanted to know what my rights were around, like, just trying to get that identifying piece of information out. And
taken down.
I was told, like, I couldn't, basically, you know, because of these gag laws that were still in place in the Northern Territory, and still are, by the way. I wasn't able to, like, do anything about it. I couldn't, like, contact.
Yeah. And
it was already out there.
Yeah.
But after that initial reporting, I think that there was, like, a conversation of this flying a bit too close to the sun here. You guys can't, like, say it's a family member. Like, everyone bloody knows. So then all the follow-up media, like, sort of reported on him and his previous work and those sorts of things. And I was really, and again, as I said, we shared professional networks, and it was really hard to see, you know, work that I had contributed to throughout my adult life, which I'm extremely proud and I've been very happy to be able to do, but to see that be brought into it.
Yeah.
When it was really genuinely not relevant. And I felt like it was already out there. And I also didn't want people to think that the reason it was initially said, like, it was initially reported as a family member and then went to go into his professional stuff. I didn't want them to think it was because there was any shame attached to it on my end. And it felt just really important. Again, I think for me personally, like, I just hadn't heard of any other cases of, like, sibling sexual abuse being discussed. And I think for me it was just really important to just have that, like, acknowledged.
Yeah.
Just that familial relationship, to have it acknowledged but also not be the focus of it.
Yeah.
To have it acknowledged as this is a sexual assault.
Yeah.
Was really important to me. So so I kind of I ended up getting some legal advice around that. And yeah.
That snowballed, didn't it?
It really did. So I think it really did. So obviously that was the initial reason I sort of asked them. A was to clarify why it wasn't being reported, why they couldn't.
We just wanted to know what was going on.
I didn't understand it, yeah. So
it's just like the bare minimum. You'd think. And
I think actually the other thing that's really important to note is that also for me, from my perspective, from my perspective, the fact that it hadn't been the fact that the perpetrator's, like, work and all of that was being brought into it, not only is, like, offensive to me, and, you know, stands in contrast to the values that I hold and have worked towards my whole life, it also just fed into his narrative, like, you know, it's because I'm so important, and I just like, and that sort of stuff. Like, sorry, it is funny, yeah. Sorry, so it is, yeah. Like, so I think that was, like, a really important thing to me as well. Like,
well, that's fair.
You're making this worse for me. Like,
yeah,
you know,
totally fair.
Yeah.
So advice about what was going on was the start, but I mean, advice is different to representation. So
completely.
Talk me through.
Yeah. So they were also able to help me with advice, which I kind of knew was an issue, but, like, kind of didn't realise how impactful it was. You know, obviously there were variations to the initial charges laid, and the process had been really dragging out in court. And I just didn't know what was going on. And there were a lot of delays, and, like, there are always, but I'm pretty sure there were more delays,
than usual.
Yeah. I mean, it ended up being quite expedited, but there was a real delay there. And I actually remember, so when I reported this, I was 20 weeks pregnant with my second child. at this point, it'd been dragging on for a while. And I remember going to the Supreme Court for one of the call-overs. And it was, it's like the most boring, like mentions are the most boring administrative thing ever.
Oh my God, they go for like 10 seconds. For me, it was just, if someone just told me, I just wanted to know.
Totally. So this
mention is such a weird, you mentioned the weather.
Yeah.
Why is it a court mention when it's something so serious? And if someone had just explained it to me, anyway, you go.
Well, yeah, it's funny because I think actually that's probably a really good point, just to step it way back a bit, is that I definitely felt like, when it had all started to progress into criminal proceedings, right? I remember having a sit down initially with the prosecutor who'd been assigned the case, and I think it's really important in all of this to just say, and I know it's not everybody's experience of the criminal justice system and all of that, but I'm so grateful for the work that the prosecutor did on my case, the police did on my case. They're good defense lawyers, did.
Good eggs in every system.
Totally, and I think realistically, they're doing the best that they can in the situation that they've got as well. They just weren't my lawyers, and they also weren't as used to people wanting information about what was happening. And I think that was the thing. I think
that's crazy.
I know. And
who wouldn't want to know what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, and this is the thing I always think. People talk about trauma-informed care or all of this stuff. And it is such a buzzword. And whenever I've explained it to people that I know that don't sit in this space at all, it took me a really long time to realise that trauma-informed means talking to people like they're not stupid. I know. It is quite honestly that.
I'm a human. Talk to me like one, not just this weird, vulnerable, handle with care thing.
So imagine this, and it was so offensive to me as well because I had struggled my whole life with, the impacts of what had happened to me. The point in time in which I went to the police, I was I mean, it was awful, but it was I was really proud of myself. So it was really bizarre to all of a sudden be treated so delicately. And yes, I need to go see a therapist. Everybody does. Absolutely. But
everybody does.
But you and I think it was just really interesting to be on the outside of that. I just wanted to know kind of what was going on. I think the first I can tell you the date of every single mention that happened. And I know realistically they'd get up, can we have a few more weeks?
Another delay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all that kind of stock standard stuff. But I was finding out about the next date in the NT News, sometimes and all of those sorts of things. And I think that people just didn't get that I actually just wanted to know. And it is such a boring administrative thing, right?
Yeah, but you didn't know that it was a boring administrative thing.
Yeah.
As it was happening. Yeah. It's terrifying. You're supposedly the center of this case that is progressing, and it's progressing without you.
I was hey, I started this, whole thing. We're all here because of me. You can at least tell me what's going on.
Treat me as such.
Yeah. And I think the thing is as well, it genuinely had impacts on my life.
Of course.
The stuff that was, and I mean, it always does, but is again in the small town when, everyone we've all known or ever known, we're all bloody witnesses. It kind of had an impact on how I could go about my day-to-day life.
Absolutely.
It's
a failure to understand that. For me, I'm just that's just appalling.
Yeah.
Duh, it's commonsensical.
I it's hard because I turned really introspective because I was so scared. I don't want to talk to anyone because I don't want to put them in that position of they're going to get a call.
You have so much empathy for all these people.
Yeah. And I just, but it just is I think, I just felt like I was poison,
Contagious.
I felt I was poison to everybody around me. And And, you know, again, I still really struggle with that, like a lot of the times. But, you know, it's hard. I didn't know where everyone sat, but I didn't want to, like, go into it with people. Like, it was really difficult. It was a really difficult space to operate because I really wanted to stay out of the muckiness of it. And I was like, I'm a real, like, process-driven, like, black and white person. So I was like, yeah, like, we need to step through all these bits. I just want to do my bit and do the right thing. And, yeah.
And did a lawyer create a buffer for you? How would you describe the change, the before and after?
Yeah. Gave me a seat at the table that I had created, and I never wanted to, you know, take control of the situation. And, you know, importantly for me, you know, it was important for me to not be the one pursuing it. It was just that I had made some representations to the community, you know, and in the process had been thrown into this really confusing situation where people just, you know, like the prosecutors, again, fantastic, and they are fantastic, but their professional obligations lay with the community. They don't lay with me. And obviously, you know, they got to look after us all in the process. And
I am a member of the community.
Yeah. And but like they couldn't, from that legal perspective, you know, it's important for them, you know, to not take overly aggressive. Yeah, to be more impartial, to not take overly, you know, aggressive approaches to the prosecution of an individual. Obviously, we all have certain, you know, opinions on, you know, different classes, but the reality is they all sit within that criminal justice system, and there are some really vulnerable people that, you know, are on that fence. So I think it's really important to do for that to take, you know, place, and for them to have those protections, and for the for prosecutors to, like, you know, be mindful of that space that they occupy. Just they have the professional obligation, but I also just think as a community, like, we want that. But also, yeah, along the way, like, I had things that I was worried about, you know. I, you know, wanted to make sure that I was able to put forward the things that I was concerned about. I wanted clarity on. I was just able to, like, advocate for myself without, you know, I had a little bit of a buffer there. Like, people that were just in my corner were able to take the time to explain things to me, but also as well were able to make representations. And I think that's the important thing is, and I think we kind of talked about this off camera a little bit, but there is a difference between advice and representation, and they were able to provide me with representation that kind of sat outside of the criminal system and those proceedings, you know, in relation to my rights with the media, and talking to them and asking them, you know, please don't publish this, or please do, like, those sorts of things that I think are really important. And I think it's a really important piece of that puzzle, just about rights around privacy and protecting those throughout the trial, because we want to strike the balance of the courts getting all of the information that they need, victims having all of that information, the courts having all of the information that they need for a criminal trial, and victims being able to have, like, the privacy to be able to give those in safe spaces. But also, so, you know, for the media to be able to, like, do accurate reporting on this. And I think, you know, there's a lot to be said about media exploiting and all of that stuff, but also as well, a lot of the systems in place in the criminal justice system make it almost impossible to provide accurate reporting on these matters. I think, you know, and I think that's really a space as well, I think that, like, is a really important thing to think about when it comes to independent legal representation as well, is really making sure that people with those expertise are able to provide assistance to sexual assault survivors. You know, there's you're familiar with the, like, concept of Brown and Dunn, right? If there's an accusation is going to be made against someone, you have to put it to them on the stand and show their response. Now, it's really important that victims do give their evidence in a closed court, right? In a private courtroom, which means no media is allowed in there. But what that has the practical effect of is that, you know, when you see these stories, you see, I'm going to say him and her.
We know what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah. But, you know, he says, well, she's crazy. And then, or, you know, she did X, Y, Z. And then actually in a private court, there's a very legitimate.
She said all sorts of things and you don't know what they are.
It was a really, you know, like it just, and also as well, like some of the defenses are ridiculous. Like, and, you know, it really easily taken down. And I think, you know, it's great that they've got that privacy, but there's like, it does create an imbalance in terms of the media reporting and our understanding of it. And then conversely, when it comes to the sentencing process, right, the one part of, you know, when it comes to sentencing, victims are provided the opportunity to give a victim impact statement. It is given in an open court. And I, you know, and media are able to report on it. But the thing is, in that end, there are some things that people don't want the entire world to know, but is really important information for the court to have. And and quite often the, you know, advice that's sort of given to victims is just leave that bit out. And it's like, actually, like, you want to create that safe buffer for like balance and nuance. And it's really crucial and fundamental to our understanding in how, like, you know, it's not just even about, you know, sexual assaults and the myths and busting all of that. It's also as well speaks really fundamental to like our civics education, which is in a real decline. Like we actually don't understand how these things function. And I think that's absolutely, you know, a space where I think independent legal representation is absolutely really crucial for a lot of people. And I mean, and it's interesting because, you know, we're not talking like big things. Like it's like, you know, in these small towns, there's always little stories about this, you know, and that really impacts people. It impacts the communities. Like their entire communities are impacted when something like this unfolds within them. And I think everybody kind of deserves to make sure that it is handled in a way that
handled with integrity.
With integrity, yeah.
And that's what I love when I hear you speak. It's so funny to me that you're like, oh no, I just wanted this. I didn't want to make waves, even though you well and truly deserve to be informed of, you know, like you have needs and you are entitled to those needs. Like as we've said, the case wouldn't exist without you. But also you speak about independent legal representation as something much bigger than you and much bigger than the justice system as well. You know, it goes into, you know, democracy, our principles of civic participation and accountability. And it's about protecting and lifting the integrity of the system. It's not about overcorrecting the other way and suddenly the victim's a party or I don't know, I can't think of another sort of overstretch because we're so far in the opposite direction. But that's to me, I just love, you're so community minded and it always comes back to that.
Yeah, and actually it's probably a good way to kind of like circle back just in terms of talking about being community minded again as well, just having that acknowledgement that my matter was going through the community in which I grew up in and holds a really special place in my heart and has had a huge impact on the person that I have become. I have to absolutely like acknowledge that in that system there is an absolute over-representation of our First Nations people, and they're not like it's not an abstract kind of thought for me.
These are your friends and community members, your neighbours.
Like you know, I'm so aware that I have so much privilege in that broader system. Like the Northern Territory has some really serious issues. It is still the worst, despite a lot of tough on crime sort of things that have been coming up. It is still the worst place to be a victim. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but it is the only place in which there's no like legislated rights for victims.
Charter, yeah.
Yeah. I was just so aware that something like what had happened to me could really easily be weaponized against other people. And I think that's why like that balance in the system is really crucial because, yeah, like again, mine sat in a broader context of criminal process and I feel really privileged to have grown up in the community that I did. It's had a massive impact on who I've become, and I couldn't live with myself if I wasn't really mindful of like the broader context of that. And I think that is why independent legal representation is the perfect balance of that, just to make sure that we're not, you know, and I think we just, it is so morally wrong for us to have this idea of good guys and bad guys. Mm-hmm. It is a table like that we all need to sit at. It is about our community. It is about our safety. You know, we all want to be protected from being accused of a serious crime, and I'm no international policy expert, so I'm not going to start listing off potential countries where that doesn't happen, but it doesn't happen everywhere. And we are so lucky, and we need to have those protections in place, but we also like want to live safely. And I think the other thing that's important, it is about like restoring social equity as well in that, because when we're not careful about making sure that we have those protections in place for everyone, when we're not centering them, the only people that benefit from it are people, generally speaking, that commit these sorts of sexual offences or those sorts of things. It is a privilege thing. People with privilege are able to exploit them.
Yeah.
So it is why it's like really important. It's always kind of disproportionately people from marginalised backgrounds that actually, and also really importantly, like a lot of people that find themselves in the criminal justice system are victims of child sexual abuse.
Yeah, yeah.
Or child abuse.
And so
generally.
many people who are incarcerated are victims
100%.
as well. Like who are actually, who are at the end stage of the justice system. I think that's a perfect way to wrap up. I love that we all need to sit at the table.
Yeah.
Like how simple is that? That's a wrap, Larry. I can't thank you enough. We'll keep chatting like we always do. You and I could yap for hours. I am so grateful for you to share, you know, not just your experience of this reform and the role it can play in, you know, not just supporting victims, but the whole of community and whole of institution really. Yeah. Multiple institutions, but also, you know, diving into the nuances of what it's like to experience the harm that you experienced. You never cease to amaze me. You are the bravest person I know. And thank you for taking the time to come and sit with little old me.
No problem. Always a pleasure. Not that we've done a podcast before, but
I know,
it's always a pleasure.
Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you.
If you've listened this far, you already know something most Australians don't. Victim survivors are the only people in sexual offence trials without their own lawyer. That doesn't have to stay true, but justice systems don't change because they quietly evolve. They change because people understand them and demand better. Go to withyouwecan.org to be a part of that demand. This has been What No One Told Us.